Tuesday's Democratic presidential primary debate was the first since Democrats launched an impeachment inquiry into President Trump. Former Vice President Joe Biden defended himself from attacks from President Trump and denied he or his son Hunter did anything wrong regarding Ukraine. When asked about the scandal by reporters earlier today, Biden pivoted to the president.
Mr. President, you want to talk about corruption? I've released 21 years of my tax returns. I entered as one of the poorest men in Congress, left one of the poorest men in government, in Congress, and as vice president. I made no money while I was in there other than my salary. Mr. President, even Richard Nixon released his tax returns. Mr. President, release your tax returns or shut up.
For more on last night's debate, I want to bring in Sullivan. He's a CBSN political contributor and a national politics reporter for The Washington Post. All right, Sean, so the big storyline heading into yesterday's debate was how Joe Biden would handle questions about Ukraine and impeachment. What was your assessment of how he handled those questions?
Well, as you pointed out, Elaine, he tried to pivot often to keep the focus on President Trump and not on questions about his conduct as vice president and questions about his son. Now, here's the challenge for Biden. A lot of the attacks that he's facing right now from President Trump and his allies are unfounded attacks. They're not based in fact. They're not backed up by reality. But he still has to respond to those concerns. And there are a lot of Democrats I've talked to who said, you know, look, the more he has to talk about this, the less time he has to talk about health care. The more he has to talk about this, the less time he has to contrast himself with other candidates. And it's a challenge. And it's a challenge when you think about voters who aren't paying super close attention to the ins and outs of the Ukraine situation and the impeachment inquiry. They might look at this, some Democrats say, and say, you know, what was Hunter Biden doing? What was Joe Biden doing as vice president? So it's a big challenge for Biden. We see his strategy in what we heard from him at the debate last night and again today. But the question is whether that strategy will end up working or not.
So Senator Amy Klobuchar and Mayor Pete Buttigieg went after Senator Elizabeth Warren in the debate. Let's listen to them question how she would pay for her health care plan.
But you have not specified how you're going to pay for the most expensive plan, Medicare for All. Will you raise taxes on the middle class to pay for it, yes or no?
So I have made clear what my principles are here, and that is costs will go up for the wealthy and for big corporations, and for hardworking middle-class families, costs will go down.
Well, we heard it tonight, a yes or no question that didn't get a yes or no answer. Look, this is why people here in the Midwest are so frustrated with Washington in general and Capitol Hill in particular. Your signature, Senator, is to have a plan for everything, except this.
At least Bernie's being honest here and saying how he's going to pay for this and that taxes are going to go up. And I'm sorry, Elizabeth, but you have not said that. And I think we owe it to the American people to tell them where we're going to send the invoice.
So, Sean, I mean, that was a yes or no question. There was not a yes or no answer. Is that potentially an area that could be a vulnerability for Senator Warren?
It is an area. It's one that Democrats have brought up more and more. And it's also a question that's coming up at her town hall meetings from voters who are wondering more and more about what her approach is to Medicare for All and how she would finance it. And she really did get the front-runner treatment for the first time last night. When you look at the previous debates, she's never faced attacks on the scale we saw last night, getting it from Buttigieg and also Senator Klobuchar and Senator Harris. So this was her first real test. How do you sustain your position against these attacks? And as long as she's going to stay at the top of the polls where she is right now, you could expect that she's going to continue to face these attacks, particularly on health care and particularly from Pete Buttigieg, who is clear in his desire to want to draw a contrast between what he's advocating and what Senator Warren's advocating. So these questions about higher taxes on the middle class, how Medicare for All would be paid for, I think they're going to continue to follow her as she continues in this campaign.
Meantime, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez plans to endorse Senator Bernie Sanders, and Congresswoman Ilhan Omar already has. What impact could that have on Senator Sanders' campaign?
Well, this could have a potentially significant impact. These are two members of Congress, two women of color who have significant national followings. They are members of Congress who generate a lot of excitement in the liberal base of the Democratic Party. And when a lot of Democrats were looking at what these members of Congress were going to do in terms of their endorsements, it looked like for a lot of people that it came down to a choice between Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. And the fact that they have sided with Senator Sanders and not with Warren could help him bolster his case that he is trying to make, that he is, the one liberal standard bearer in this race. The bigger question, though, is whether this does anything to help him build beyond his loyal base of supporters. Does it bring in new voters who are not necessarily fans of these members of Congress? And some Democrats are skeptical it'll do that. But on the whole, the Sanders campaign is very, very happy about this. It's been a tough couple of weeks for them. The senator has been recovering from a heart attack. He's been off the campaign trail. So they look at this moment as one where they can sort of pivot to a new stage of the campaign. The reviews that he got in his debate performance were pretty positive. So on the whole right now, for the Sanders team, they're very, very thrilled with these endorsements.
Well, what effect could these endorsements have on other candidates' campaigns, namely Senator Elizabeth Warren?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this affects the way her campaign is viewed, because, of course, there are a lot of voters, a lot of left-leaning voters that Sanders and Warren are competing for, and they might look at these endorsements as, for some of them who are undecided, as reasons why they should side with Bernie Sanders. But at the same time, Warren is sort of trying to build a bigger and broader coalition in some ways than Sanders is right now, and so it could have the effect of, having her appear as somebody who is not necessarily just a liberal candidate. And some Democrats think that could be a good thing for her. So we'll see how it affects her in the long run. But right now, the Sanders campaign is definitely emphasizing these endorsements. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez is going to appear with Senator Sanders at a rally in New York on Saturday. This is his first rally since he was taken off the trail for the health scare that he experienced, the heart attack that he experienced in Las Vegas a couple of weeks ago. So this is a big event. They're really pumping this up as a big moment in this campaign.
And Sean, this debate had 12 candidates on stage. Next debate coming up in November 20th, likely to look different. What's required to qualify for that debate?
Well, as we go forward in time, these debates are becoming more and more difficult to qualify for, and that's by design. The Democratic National Committee is saying, look, if you're going to stay in these debates, if you're going to stay on this debate stage, you're going to have to keep up with a more competitive pace. And what that means is they're going to have to raise more money, and they're going to have to do better in the polls than they have before. And so right now, I think it's only 8 candidates that have qualified for the next debate. So we could see a shrinking field of candidates that appears not just in the November debate, but in the debates beyond that. And so these candidates really have to make the most of their time, particularly the ones that are, sort of stuck in the single digits in the polls, because it might be the case that they don't qualify for the next debate. So they really have to maximize the moments that they have.
That's right. Clock is ticking. All right, Sean Sullivan in Washington. Sean, always great to have you. Thank you.
Thanks, Elaine.